Section 22, Letters 106 to 110. Letter the 106th. The Marquise de Merteuil to the Vicomte de Valmont.
Amazing, Vicomte! And this time I love you furiously. For the rest, after the first of your 2 letters I could expect a second. Thus it did not astonish me, and whilst proud already of your success to come, you were soliciting its reward, and asking me if I were ready, I saw clearly that I had no such need for haste. Yes, upon my honour, reading the beautiful account of that tender scene which had moved you so deeply, observing your restraint worthy of the fairest days of our chivalry, I said to myself a score of times, "The affair has failed." But that it is because it could not befall otherwise. What do you expect a poor woman to do who surrenders and is not taken? My faith, in such a case one must at least save one's honour, and that is what your Présidente does. I know well that, for myself, who can perceive that the step she has taken is really not without some effect, I propose to make use of it myself on the first rather serious occasion which presents itself. But I promise you that, if he for whom I go to that trouble profits no better than you from it, he may assuredly renounce me for ever. Here you are, then, reduced, brought to impotence, and that between 2 women, one of whom had already crossed the Rubicon, and the other was asking nothing better than to do so. Well, well, you will think that I am boasting, and say that it is easy to prophesy after the event, but I can swear to you that I expected as much. It is because you have not really the genius of your estate. You know nothing except what you have learned, and you invent nothing. Thus, as soon as circumstances no longer lend themselves to your accustomed formulas, and you are compelled to leave the beaten road, you pull up short like a schoolboy. In short, a piece of childishness on the one side, a return of prudery on the other, are enough to disconcert you, because you do not meet with them every day, and you know not how either to prevent or remedy them. Ah, Vicomte, Vicomte, you teach me not to judge men by their successes, and soon we shall have to say of you, "On such and such a day he was brave." And when you have committed follies after follies, you come running to me. It seems that I have nothing else to do but to repair them. It is true that there would be work enough there. Whatever may be the state of these 2 adventures, one was undertaken against my will, and I will not meddle in it. For the other, as you have brought some complaisance for me to bear upon it, I make it my business. The letter which I enclose, which you will read first, and then give to the little Volanges, is more than sufficient to bring her back to you. But I beg you give some attention to this child, and let us make her, in concert, the despair of her mother and of Gercourt. You need not fear to increase the doses. I see clearly that the little person will not take alarm, and, your views upon her once fulfilled, she may become what she will. I am entirely without interest on her account. I had had some desire to make of her, at least, a subaltern in intrigue, and to take her to play understudies to me, but I see that she has not the stuff in her. She has a foolish ingenuousness, which has not even yielded to the specific you have employed, though it be one which rarely fails, and it is, according to me, the most dangerous disease a woman can have. It denotes, above all, a weakness of character almost always incurable, and opposed to everything. In such wise that, whilst we busied ourselves in forming this little girl for intrigue, we should have made nothing of her but a facile woman. Now I know nothing so insipid as that idiotic facility which surrenders without knowing how or why, solely because it is attacked and knows not how to resist. This kind of woman is absolutely nothing than a pleasure machine. You will tell me that this is all there is to do, and that it is enough for your plans. Well and good. But do not let us forget that with that kind of machine everybody soon attains to a knowledge of the springs and motors. In order, therefore, to employ this one without danger, one must hasten, stop at the right moment, and break it afterwards. In truth, there will be no lack of means to disembarrass ourselves of it, and Gercourt, at any rate, will shut it up securely when it is our pleasure. Indeed, when he can no longer doubt of his dishonour, when it is quite public and notorious, what will it matter to us if he avenges, provided that he do not console himself? What I say of the husband, you doubtless think of the mother. Thus the affair is settled. The course I deem the better, and upon which I have decided, has induced me to conduct the little person somewhat rapidly, as you will see by my letter. It also renders it most important that nothing should be left in her hands which might compromise us, and I beg you to pay attention to this. This precaution once taken, I charge myself with the moral teaching. The rest concerns you. If, however, we see in the issue that ingenuousness is cured, we have always time to change our project. We should, in any case, have had, one day or other, to occupy ourselves with what we are about to do. In no case will our pains be wasted. Do you know that mine risked being so, and that the Gercourt's star came near to carrying the day over my prudence? Did not Madame de Volanges show a moment of maternal weakness? Did she not want to marry her daughter to Danceny? It was that which was presaged by that more tender interest which you remarked the day after. It is you again who would have been the cause of this noble masterpiece. Luckily the tender mother wrote to me, and I hope that my reply will disillusion her. I talk so much virtue in it, and above all I flatter her so, that she is bound to think I am right. I am sorry that I have not found time to make a copy of my letter to edify you with the austerity of my morals. You would see how I despise women who are so depraved as to take a lover. 'Tis so convenient to be a rigorist in conversation. It does no hurt, except to others, and in no way impedes ourselves. And then I am quite aware that the good lady had her little peccadillos like any other in her young days, and I was not sorry to humiliate her, at least before her conscience. It consoled me a little for the praises I gave her against my own. It was similarly that, in the same letter, the idea of harming Gercourt gave me the courage to speak well of him. Adieu, Vicomte. I thoroughly approve the course you adopt in remaining some time where you are. I have no means of spurring on your progress, but I invite you to distract yourself with our common pupil. As for myself, in spite of your obliging summons, you see well that you have still to wait, and you will doubtless admit that it is not my fault. Paris, 3rd of October, 17.
Letter the 107th. Azolan to the Vicomte de Valmont.
Monsieur, conformably to your orders, I went, immediately on receipt of your letter, to Monsieur Breton, who gave me the 25 louis, as you had ordered him. I asked him for 2 more for Philippe, whom I had told to set off immediately, as Monsieur had commanded me, and who had no money. But your man of business would not do so, saying that he had no order from you for that. I was obliged, therefore, to give him these myself, and Monsieur will hold me acquitted of them, if it be his good pleasure. Philippe set off yesterday evening. I strongly impressed upon him not to leave the inn, so that we might be certain of finding him if we had need of him. I went immediately afterwards to Madame la Présidente to see Mademoiselle Julie, but she was gone out, and I could only speak to La Fleur, from whom I could learn nothing, as, since his arrival, he has only been to the house at mealtimes. It is the second lackey who does all the service, and monsieur knows that I was not acquainted with him. But I began to-day. I returned this morning to Mademoiselle Julie, and she seemed delighted to see me. I questioned her upon the cause of her mistress's return, but she told me that she knew not of it, and I believe she told the truth. I reproached her for having failed to inform me of her departure, and she assured me that she had not known of it till the night before when putting Madame to bed, so that she spent all night in packing, and the poor wench had not 2 hours' sleep. She did not leave her mistress's chamber that night till past 1, and left her just as she was sitting down to write. In the morning, Madame la Tourvel, before leaving, handed a letter to the porter of the chateau. Mademoiselle Julie does not know for whom. She says that it was perhaps for monsieur, but monsieur does not speak of it. During the whole journey, Madame had a great hood over her face. By reason of this, one could not see her, but Mademoiselle Julie feels assured that she often wept. She did not speak one word, and she would not halt at
Note: the aforementioned village, halfway on the road.
As she had done on her coming, which was none too pleasing of Mademoiselle Julie, who had not breakfasted. But, as I said to her, the masters are the masters. On arriving, Madame went to bed, but she only remained there 2 hours. On rising, she summoned her Swiss, and gave him orders to admit nobody. She made no toilette at all. She sat down to table for dinner, but only took a little soup, and went away at once. Her coffee was brought to her room, and Mademoiselle Julie entered at the same time. She found her mistress arranging papers in her writing desk, and she saw that they were letters. I would wager that they were those from monsieur, and of the 3 which came to her in the afternoon, there was one which she had still before her all the evening. I am quite certain that it is also one from monsieur. But why then did she leave like this? That is what astounds me. For that matter, monsieur is sure to know, and it is no business of mine. Madame la Présidente went in the afternoon to the library, and took thence 2 books which she carried to her boudoir, but Mademoiselle Julie is certain that she did not read a quarter of an hour in them during the whole day, and that she does nothing but read this letter and dream, with her head resting on her hand. As I thought that monsieur would be pleased to know what these books are, and as Mademoiselle Julie could not say, I obtained admission to the library under the pretence of wishing to see it. There are only 2 books missing. One is the 2nd volume of the Pensées Chrétiennes, and the other, the first of a book entitled Clarissa. I write the name as it is written. Monsieur will, perhaps, know what it is. Yesterday evening, Madame did not sup. She took only some tea. She rang at an early hour this morning, asked at once for her horses, and went, before 9 o'clock, to the Bernardines, where she heard mass. She wished to confess, but her confessor was away, and he will not return for a week or 10 days. I thought it well to inform monsieur of this. She returned immediately, breakfasted, and then began to write, and she remained thus for nearly an hour. I soon found occasion to do what monsieur desired the most, for it was I who carried the letters to the post. There was none for Madame de Volanges, but I sent one to monsieur, which was for Monsieur la Présidente. It seemed to me that this should be the most interesting. There was one also for Madame la Rosamonde, but I imagined that monsieur could always see that when he wished, and I let it go. For the rest, monsieur is sure to know everything, since Madame la Présidente has written to him also. I shall in the future obtain all those which monsieur desires, for it is Mademoiselle Julie, almost every day, who gives them to the servants, and she has assured me that, out of friendship for me, and for monsieur too, she will gladly do what I want. She did not even want the money which I offered her, but I feel sure that monsieur would like to make her some little present, and if this is his wish, and he is willing to charge me with it, I shall easily find out what will give her pleasure. I hope that monsieur will not think that I have shown any negligence in his service, and I have set my heart on justifying myself against the reproaches he makes me. If I did not know of Madame la Présidente's departure, it was, on the contrary, my zeal in monsieur's service which was the cause, since it was that which made me start at 3 o'clock in the morning, which was the reason that I did not see Mademoiselle Julie the night before, as usual having gone to Tonneybridge to sleep, so that I might not have to rouse the chateau. As for the reproach monsieur makes me of being often without money, first, it is because I like to keep myself decent, as monsieur may see, and then one must maintain the honor of the coat one wears. I know indeed that I ought, perhaps, to save a little for the future, but I trust entirely to the generosity of Monsieur, who was so good a master. As for entering the service of Madame de Tourvel, whilst remaining in that of Monsieur, I beg that Monsieur will not require this of me. It was very different with Madame la Duchesse, but certainly I would not wear a livery, and a livery of the robe no less, after having had the honor of being Monsieur's chasseur. In every other way, Monsieur may dispose of him who has the honor to remain, with as much affection as respect, his most humble servitor. Rue Azalon, Chasseur. Paris, 5th October, 17, at 11 o'clock at night.
Letter the 108th. The Présidente de Tourvel to Madame de Rosemonde.
Oh, my indulgent mother, how many thanks I have to render you, and what need I had of your letter! I have read it again and again. I cannot put it away from me. I owe to it the few less painful moments I have spent since my departure. How good you are! Prudence and virtue know then how to compassionate weakness. You take pity on my ills. Oh, if you knew them! They are terrible. I thought I had experienced the pains of love, but the inexpressible torment, that which one must have felt to have any idea of it, is to be separated from the object of one's love, to be separated for ever. Yes, the pain which crushes me to-day will return to-morrow, the day after, all my life. My God, how young I am still, and how long a time I have to suffer. To be one's self the architect of one's own misery, to tear out one's heart with one's own hands, and whilst suffering these insupportable sorrows to feel at each instant that one can make them cease with a word, and that this word is a crime. Ah, my friend! When I adopted this painful course and separated myself from him, I hoped that absence would augment my courage and my strength. How greatly I was deceived! It seems, on the contrary, as though it had completed the work of destruction. I had more to struggle against, 'tis true, but even while resisting all was not privation. At least I sometimes saw him. Often even, without daring to direct my eyes towards him, I felt his own were fixed on me. Yes, my friend, I felt them. It seemed as though they warmed my soul. And without passing through my eyes, they none the less arrived at my heart. Now, in my grievous solitude, isolated from all that is dear to me, closeted with my misfortune, every moment of my sorrowful existence is marked by my tears, and nothing sweetens its bitterness, no consolation is mingled with my sacrifices, and those I have thus far made have only served to render more dolorous those which are left to make. Yesterday, again, I had a lively feeling of this. Amongst the letters they brought me there was one from him. They were still 2 paces off from me when I recognized it amongst the rest. I rose involuntarily. I trembled. I could hardly hide my emotion. And this state was not altogether unpleasant. A moment later, finding myself alone, this deceitful sweetness soon vanished, and left me but one sacrifice the more to make. Could I actually open this letter, which, however, I burned to read? In the fatality which pursues me, the consolations which seem to present themselves do nothing, on the contrary, but impose fresh privations, and those become crueller still from the thought that Monsieur de Valmont shares them. There it is at last, that name which so constantly fills my mind, and which it costs me so much to write. The sort of reproach you make really alarmed me. I beg you to believe that a false shame has not altered my confidence in you, and why should I fear to name him? Ah, I blush for my sentiments, but not for the object which causes them. Who other than he is worthy to inspire them? However, I know not why, this name does not come naturally to my pen, and even this time I had need of reflection to write it. I return to him. You tell me that he seemed to you keenly grieved at my departure. What then did he do? What did he say? Did he speak of returning to Paris? I beg you to dissuade him as much as you can. If he has judged me aright, he cannot bear me any ill will for this step, but he must feel also that it is a course from which there is no return. One of my greatest torments is not to know what he thinks. I still have his letter there, but you are surely of my opinion that I ought not to open it. It is only through you, my indulgent friend, that I can feel myself not entirely separated from him. I would not abuse your kindness. I understand perfectly that your letters cannot be long ones. But you will not deny your child 2 words, one to sustain her courage, and the other to console her. Adieu, my venerable friend. Paris, 5th October, 17 .
Letter the 109th. Cécile Volanges to the Marquise de Merteuil.
It is only to-day, madame, that I have given Monsieur de Valmont the letter which you have done me the honour to write me. I kept it for 4 days, in spite of the alarm which I often felt lest it should be found, but I concealed it very carefully, and when my grief once more seized me, I shut myself up to reperuse it. I quite see that what I believed to be so great a misfortune is hardly one at all, and I must confess that there is certainly pleasure in it, so much so that I hardly grieve about it any more. It is only the thought of Danceny which still sometimes torments me, but there are already moments when I do not think of him at all. Moreover, it is true that Monsieur de Valmont is mighty amiable. I was reconciled with him 2 days ago. It was very easy for me, for I had but said 2 words to him, when he told me that, if I had anything to say to him, he would come to my chamber in the evening, and I only had to answer that I was very willing. And then, as soon as he had come there, he seemed no more vexed than if I had never done anything to him. He did not scold me till afterwards, and then very gently, and it was in a manner just like you, which proved to me that he also had much friendship for me. I should not know how to tell you all the odd things he related to me, and which I never should have believed, particularly about mamma. You would give me much pleasure by telling me if it is all true. What is very sure is that I could not restrain my laughter, so that once I burst out laughing, which gave us a mighty fright, for mamma might have heard, and if she had come to see what would have become of me, I am sure she would have sent me to the convent that very moment. As we must be prudent, and as Monsieur de Valmont has told me himself that he would not risk compromising me for anything in the world, we have agreed that henceforward he should only come to open the door, and that we should go to his room. In that there is nothing to fear. I have already been there yesterday, and even now, while I write to you, I am again expecting him to come. Now, madame, I hope you will not scold me any more. There is one thing, however, which has greatly surprised me in your letter. It is what you tell me against the time when I am married, with regard to Danceny and Monsieur de Valmont. I fancy that one day at the opera you told me, on the contrary, that once married I could only love my husband, and that I should even have to forget Danceny. For that matter, I may have misunderstood you, and I would far rather have it different, as now I shall not be so much afraid of the time for my marriage. I even desire it, since I shall have more liberty, and I hope then that I shall be able to arrange in such a fashion that I need only think of Danceny. I feel sure that I shall never be really happy except with him, for the idea of him always torments me now, and I have no happiness except when I succeed in not thinking of him, which is very difficult, and as soon as I think of him, I at once become sad again. What consoles me a little is that you assure me Danceny will love me the more for this. But are you quite certain? Oh yes, you would not deceive me. It is amusing, however, that it is Danceny I love, and that Monsieur de Valmont, but as you say, perhaps it is fortunate. Well, we shall see. I understood none too well what you said about my fashion of writing. It seems to me that Danceny finds my letters good as they are. I quite feel, however, that I ought to tell him nothing of what passes with Monsieur de Valmont. Thus you have no reason to be afraid. Mamma has not yet spoken to me of my marriage, but let her do so. When she speaks to me of it, since it is to entrap me, I promise you I shall know how to lie. Adieu, my dear, kind friend. I thank you mightily, and I promise you I will never forget all your kindnesses to me. I must finish now, It is near 1 o'clock, so Monsieur de Valmont cannot be long now. At the Château de 10th of October 17.
Letter the 110th. The Vicomte de Valmont to the Marquise de Merteuil.
Powers of heaven, I had a soul for sorrow, grant me one now for felicity.
Note, La Nouvelle Héloïse.
It is the tender Saint-Preux, I think, who thus expresses himself. Better balanced than he, I possess these two existences at once. Yes, my friend, I am at the same time most happy and most miserable. And since you have my entire confidence, I owe you the double relation of my pleasures and my pains. Know then that my ungrateful Puritan treats me ever with the same rigour. I am at the 4th letter which has been returned. Perhaps I am wrong to call it the 4th, for having excellently well divined, on the return of the 1st, that it would be followed by many others, and being unwilling thus to waste my time, I adopted the course of turning my complaints into commonplaces, and putting no date. And since the 2nd post, it is always the same letter which comes and goes. I merely change the envelope. If my fair one ends as ordinarily end the fair, and softens, if only from lassitude, she will keep the missive at last, and it will be time enough then to pick up the threads. You see that with this new manner of correspondence I cannot be perfectly well informed. I have discovered, however, that the fickle creature has changed her confidante. At least, I have made sure that since her departure from the chateau, no letter has come for Madame de Volanges, whilst there have been 2 for the old Rosemonde. And as the latter says nothing to us of them, as she no longer opens her mouth on the subject of her dearest fair, of whom previously she never ceased to speak, I concluded that it was she who had her confidence. I presume that on one side the need of speaking of me, and on the other a little shame at returning with Madame de Volanges to the subject of a sentiment so long disavowed, have caused this great revolution. I fear that I have lost by the change, for the older women grow, the more crabbed and severe do they become. The first would have told her far more ill of me, but the latter will say more of love. And the sensitive prude has far more fear of the sentiment than of the person. The only means of getting at the facts is, as you see, to intercept the clandestine correspondence. I have already sent the order to my chasseur, and I am daily awaiting its execution. So far I can do nothing except at random. Thus, for the last week, I run my mind in vain over all recognised means, all those in the novels and in my private recollections. I can find none which befits either the circumstances of the adventure or the character of the heroine. The difficulty would not be to present myself before her, even in the night, nor again to induce her slumber, and make of her a new Clarissa. But after more than 2 months of care and trouble, to have recourse to means which are foreign to me, to follow slavishly in the tracks of others, and triumph without glory. No, she shall not have the pleasures of vice and the honours of virtue.
Note, La Nouvelle Héloïse.
'Tis not enough for me to possess her, I wish her to give herself. Now, for that I need not only to penetrate to her presence, but to reach her by her own consent, to find her alone and with the intention of listening to me, above all, to close her eyes as to the danger, for if she sees it she will know how to surmount it, or to die. But the more clearly I see what I need to do, the more difficult do I find its execution. And though it should induce you to laugh at me once more, I will confess that my embarrassment is enhanced in proportion to the extent to which it occupies me. My brain would reel, I think, were it not for the lucky distraction which our common pupil affords me. I owe it to her that I have still something else to do than compose elegies. Would you believe that this little girl had taken such fright that 3 whole days passed before your letter produced its effect? 'Tis thus that one false idea can spoil the most fortunate nature. In short, it was not until Saturday that she came and hovered round me, and stammered out a few words, and those pronounced in so low a voice, so stifled with shame, that it was impossible to hear them. But the blush which accompanied them made me guess their sense. Thus far I had retained my pride, but subdued by so pleasant a repentance, I consented to promise a visit to the fair penitent that same evening, and this grace on my part was received with all the gratitude that so great a condescension demanded. As I never lose sight either of your projects or my own, I resolved to profit by this occasion to gain a just estimate of the child's value, and also to accelerate her education. But to pursue this work with greater freedom, I found it necessary to change the place of our rendezvous, for a simple closet which separates your pupil's room from that of her mother could not inspire sufficient security to allow her to reveal herself at her ease. I promised myself then innocently to make some noise, which would cause her enough alarm to induce her, for the future, to seek a safer asylum. This trouble she spared me again. The little person loves laughter, and to promote her gaiety I bethought myself during our entr'acte to relate to her all the scandalous anecdotes which occurred to my mind, and so as to render them more piquant and better to fix her attention, I attributed them all to her mother, whom I was thus pleased to bedaub with vice and ridicule. It was not without motive that I made this choice. It encouraged my timid schoolgirl better than anything else, and I inspired her at the same time with the most profound contempt for her mother. I have long remarked that if it be not always necessary to employ this means to seduce a young girl, it is indispensable, and often even the most efficacious, when one wishes to deprave her. For she who does not respect her mother will not respect herself, a moral truth which I hold to be so useful that I have been glad indeed to have furnished an example in support of the precept. Meanwhile, your pupil, who had no thought of morals, was stifling her laughter every moment. Finally, she had almost thought to have burst out with it. I had no difficulty in persuading her that she had made a terrible noise. I feigned a huge fright, which she easily shared. That she might the better remember it, I did not give way to the pleasure of a reappearance, and left her alone 3 hours earlier than was customary. We agreed, therefore, on separating, that from the morrow it was in my room that we should meet. I have already twice received her there, and in this short period the scholar has become almost as learned as the master. Yes, in truth, I have taught her everything, even to complacencies. I have only made an exception of precautions. Occupied thus all night, I gain thereby, in that I sleep a great portion of the day, and as the actual society of the chateau has nothing to attract me, I hardly appear in the salon for an hour during the day. To-day I even adopted the course of eating in my room, and I do not intend to leave it again, except for short walks. These eccentricities pass on the ground of my health. I have declared that I am worn out with vapours. I have also announced a little fever. It cost me no more than to speak in a slow and faint voice. And as for the alteration in my face, trust your pupil for that. Love will provide.
Note. L'amour y pourvoira. Régnard, Les Folies Amoureuses.
I employ my leisure in meditating means of recovering over my ingrate the advantages I have lost, and also in composing a sort of catechism of debauch for the use of my scholar. I amuse myself by mentioning nothing except by its technical name, and I laugh in advance at the interesting conversation which this ought to furnish between Gercourt and herself on the first night of their marriage. Nothing could be more amusing than the ingenuity with which she makes use already of the little she knows of this tongue. She has no conception that one can speak differently. Oh, this child is really seductive. The contrast of naive candour with the language of effrontery does not fail to have an effect, and I know not why, but it is only bizarre things which give me any longer pleasure. Perhaps I am abandoning myself overmuch to this, since I am compromising by it both my time and my health. But I hope that my feigned malady, besides that it will save me from the ennui of the drawing-room, will perhaps be of some use to me with the rigid Puritan, whose ferocious virtue is none the less allied with soft sensibility. I doubt not but that she is already informed of this mighty event, and I have a great desire to know what she thinks of it, all the more so in that I will wager she does not fail to attribute the honour of it to herself. I shall regulate the state of my health according to the impression which it makes upon her. Here you are, my fair friend, as fully acquainted with my affairs as I am myself. I hope to have shortly more interesting news to tell you, and I beg you to believe that in the pleasure which I promise myself, I count for much the reward which I expect from you. At the Chateau de 11th October 17.
End of